You know that one person, the one who walks into chaos like it's just another normal day. Something breaks. A pipe bursts. The car refuses to start. Your laptop crashes right before a deadline. Or maybe it's not even physical, maybe it's emotional. Everything just collapses at once. And while everyone else is panicking, overthinking, or already imagining the worst-case scenario, they just pause, not dramatically, not for attention, just a quiet second. They look at the situation. They don't rush to Google, they don't spiral, they don't freeze, they just think. And then, almost casually, they start doing something about it. Meanwhile, you're standing there thinking, why wasn't that my reaction? Why did my brain go straight to stress? Or shutdown? Or panic? So what actually separates these people from the rest of us? At first glance, it looks like confidence, or experience, or maybe even intelligence. But it's none of those in the way you think. To understand it, we need to go back to a concept introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura in the late 1970s. He called it self-efficacy. Now strip away the academic language, and it becomes something very simple. It's your belief that you can handle what's in front of you. Not general positivity, not blind optimism, something much more specific. It's the quiet internal sentence, I've dealt with these before, and I can deal with this too. And that one belief changes everything. Bandura found that people with high self-efficacy don't necessarily face fewer problems. They don't magically have easier lives. But when something goes wrong, they stay in the problem longer. They try more things. They give up slower. They stay mentally present instead of emotionally overwhelmed. So the real question becomes, where does that belief come from? And this is where it gets personal. Think about the very first time a kid tries to fix something and succeeds. Not something huge, something small. They wiggle a loose wire, and suddenly the lamp turns on. They restart a frozen computer, and it works. They press on a cut, and the bleeding slows. To an adult, it's nothing. But to that kid, that moment is everything. Because something shifts, not in the world, but in how they see themselves in the world. Before that moment, problems are things that happen to you. After that moment, problems become things you can interact with. Something you can step into, influence, maybe even change. Bandura called these moments mastery experiences. And research shows they are the most powerful way self-efficacy is built. Not praise. Not watching others. Not being told you can do it. Actually doing it. Even once. Because once your brain has evidence, it starts building a pattern, and over time, that pattern becomes automatic. So when something breaks later in life, their nervous system doesn't go into panic mode. It goes into something else. Something quieter. Curiosity. Almost like, what's going on here? Not fear, not avoidance. A puzzle. I've solved things before. Maybe I can solve this too. Now layer this with another concept from psychologist Julian Rotter. Locus of control. This is about where you believe control in your life comes from. People with an external locus of control believe life happens to them. Luck, fate, other people decide outcomes. People with an internal locus of control believe their actions matter. Not perfectly. Not always, but enough to try. And that belief, that your effort can influence reality, turns out to be one of the most protective psychological traits a person can have. It affects how you handle stress, how long you persist, even your vulnerability to anxiety and depression. But here's the important part. Most people were not born with this. It was shaped, usually through very specific experiences. Sometimes it came from a parent who said, I'm not giving you the answer, but I'll help you figure it out. And sometimes it came from the opposite. No one was there. So the child had no choice but to figure things out themselves. Different paths, same result. A sense of agency. Now, here's something that often gets misunderstood. From the outside, these fixer people look confident, like they know things will work out. But that's not actually true. They feel the same uncertainty you feel. The difference is, uncertainty doesn't feel like a threat to them. It feels like a starting point. There's a term for this too. Tolerance of ambiguity. The ability to sit in a situation where you don't yet have answers. without falling apart. People who struggle with this need reassurance immediately. They need to know, is this going to be okay? And when they don't get that answer, anxiety fills the gap. They freeze, they avoid, or they hand control to someone else. But the fixer, somewhere along the way, they learn to stay in that uncomfortable middle space. Not knowing, but not collapsing. And that's where problem solving actually happens. But there's a deeper layer here that's easy to miss, because not all fixers are the same. Some people learn to fix everything because they had to, because being helpless wasn't safe, because their value came from solving problems, because approval, attention, or stability depended on it. So they became hyper-capable, but underneath that capability, there's tension. They can't relax when something is unresolved. They hover, they over-involve, they feel responsible for everything. Fixing isn't just a skill for them, it's a coping mechanism, a way to stay in control. But then there's another kind of person, and this is the one worth really paying attention to. The one who fixes things out of genuine curiosity, not pressure, not fear, interest. They're fascinated by how things work. They enjoy the space between broken and fixed. They'll take something apart, even after fixing it, just to understand it better. They ask questions no one asked. They explain things in detail, not to impress, but because they're genuinely excited. They didn't just learn to fix things. They fell in love with the process of figuring things out. And being around people like that changes you, because they model something powerful without even trying. Not knowing how to do something is just temporary. Broken is not permanent, and problems are not walls. They're doors you haven't figured out how to open yet. Now, maybe you're listening to this and realizing you're already that person. Or maybe you're realizing the opposite, that your instinct is still hesitation, avoidance, overwhelm. And if it's the second one, here's the important truth. That's not a character flaw, it's a pattern. A history, a set of experiences that taught your brain. Problems are not yours to handle. But here's the part that matters most. That pattern can change. Because self-efficacy isn't fixed, it's built. The same way it started for others. Small moments, tiny wins. Not big transformations. Not dramatic breakthroughs. Just, you tried. And it worked. You tightened the screw. You made the call. You handled one small thing instead of avoiding it. And your brain notices, maybe not loudly, but quietly, it updates. Okay, maybe I can do this. And that's how it starts, not with confidence, but with evidence, and over time. That evidence becomes identity. But there's one final piece people often get stuck on. Understanding all of this doesn't automatically change anything. Because awareness alone can turn into overthinking. You see the pattern, you name it, you analyze it, and then nothing moves. That gap between knowing and doing is where most people stay stuck. And crossing that gap, it doesn't require motivation. It requires structure, small, repeatable actions that turn insight into behavior. Because in the end, the people who fix things aren't special. They've just practiced something you haven't practiced yet. And the moment you start, even in the smallest way, you're already becoming one of them. Like, share, and subscribe my channel. And thanks for watching.